we'd forgotten them. We thought we'd dealt with these minuscule monsters because we're modern and vermin were a thing from when we lived in caves. And yet, they're here. They've come back quietly and in masses. With their armored shells, their insatiable jaws, their hooks, their stings. The rear base of bedbugs is the south of Europe, but massive columns are moving north. Tiger mosquitoes, just landed in Europe, are going the same way. And then there are the others, fleas, lice, and pubic lice, commonly known as crabs. What's happening to us? What's come over them? Global warming is blamed, changing lifestyles, genetic mutation of these horrible creatures. What's going wrong? All around the world, our old persecutors are back, especially in North America and Europe. Mosquitoes, ticks, lice, bedbugs are taking on alarming proportions. In Europe, the south of France is a bridgehead for bedbugs. Jean-Michel Berenger is an entomologist and is looking for efficient ways to eradicate them. To populate the breeding centers where he makes his research, he regularly takes specimens from people's homes.
Watch out. You've got some there too on top. So there you've got a little farm. There are a lot of them. You'll have to throw the mattress out. You see, they're running everywhere. Oh, dear.
Oh, dear.
Yes, it's really infested there. Oh, there are hundreds. Watch out. They're on your hands, there are eggs, skins, all the stages are there.
From the egg to the adult insect, bedbugs pass through several stages of development. At each stage, it abandons its old covering. Insects and dust mites molt because they have no bone structure or spine. It's their cuticle, also called a shell, which serves them as a skeleton and allows them to move.
Oh, yes, well, they're really everywhere. I'll check the drawers. They're everywhere.
According to recent research, bedbugs are very sensitive to the body odor which impregnates dirty clothes. But it's our breathing which attracts them because it signals the presence of blood to them. To become adult, the larva needs a ration of human blood, which it swallows in a few minutes, after which it hides for a few days to digest.
Here we have a case of very, very large infestation. There are thousands of bedbugs here, and it could be a single female behind this phenomenon.
An adult female bedbug lays 2 to 5 eggs a day. According to the warmth of the area, they hatch within 1 to 3 weeks. In the right place, the population increases with exponential speed.
Nowadays, bedbugs are increasing everywhere. Our means of transport are, of course, their means of dispersion because they don't fly and they don't jump. So it's really us moving them about.
In the south of France, the movement of population is so favorable to bedbugs and other stinging creatures that the Mediterranean Hospital University Institute has created a unit especially for emerging diseases. Jean-Michel Berenger works in the insectarium of the institute, the largest in Europe to be devoted to the study of these menacing creatures.
And here, for example, a breeding station with thousands of lice. Here, one for ticks. Further on, we have a breeding station for fleas. And there, one for bedbugs. A big problem right now, very topical. After the last war with the arrival of DDT, a very powerful insecticide, all these creatures were almost eradicated. But DDT is a toxic product which had to be stopped. In the 90s, with globalization, the explosion of tourism and international trade, of demography as well as the poverty of the population, there was a massive return of these predators.
Quite often, the victim doesn't know what is behind the bites which they are suffering from. The first thing is to identify the aggressor.
These are requests for insect identification that I get, sometimes along with the insects as well. Also, very importantly, photos of the bites of insects, which can help to direct the diagnosis. Here, for example, a tick bite with the bite in the center, the typical halo of the spread of the infection. 3 aligned bites, typical of fleas. Here is a mosquito bite. And there on this lady, a strong reaction to massive bedbug stings. Bedbugs are about 50% of the problem.
Beyond photos of bites, some victims send hairs in envelopes, dust samples, and even plans of their homes, as if for a police inquiry. Fleas, lice, crabs, ticks, mosquitoes, and bedbugs have a terrifying range of tools to pierce human skin. Needles, stings, jaws. The morphology of the system used to pierce and suck blood varies a lot from one species to another. Each system leaves a characteristic signature. In most of the species, it's mainly the females which sting to take on, with the blood, the calories they need to bring their eggs to maturity. But there are some exceptions.
In bedbugs, everything stings. The 5 larval stages and the adult stage, and even the male stings. Everything stings with bedbugs.
Charming family. And they're sticky as well. It's very hard to get rid of them, and feeling yourself being eaten alive can make you just about lose your mind. At the University Hospital on the French Riviera, Dr. Delaunay, a phobia specialist, regularly receives anxious patients who he treats using hypnosis. I'm obsessed with the slightest little black mark on me.
Yes.
It itches me and it shouldn't itch. I've got a kind of psychosis.
So normally you have more hair, but especially itching.
It's itching.
Okay.
And it's almost as if I've got it everywhere. And I sleep 2-3 hours a night. What would help me a lot is to get rid of these little creatures.
All right. Very, very quickly, it goes beyond the insects, and we're in the need to be heard, to be calmed and relaxed, and in any case, go back to a normal life. There, at the same time, you find you can feel your hands on your trousers. People structure their lives to avoid them, lives without sociability, not allowing themselves to go to the movies, to hotels, not allowing themselves to see their friends. They're scared of contamination. And so all that needs to be heard and tools offered so the person rediscovers an agreeable, normal life. People connect very quickly the fact that blood is life and something is sucking out your life, and that sucks at you totally, all day long. So after that, you've been emptied out. The problem with bites is exponential, and as well as that, people go on the internet.
Ils ont un poignard en guise de sexe, un machin bien affûté, bien tranchant, bien piquant. Et en plus de ça, ils s'en servent comme un branquignol.
They find out about this growth, this sexuality. They find out about a very original form of sexuality.
In bedbugs, love is butchery. The male stabs and buries his reproductive organ into the female at the slightest opportunity.
And that organ must pierce the female's skin around the abdomen, which means just about anywhere, and inject spermatozoa. That's called scientifically traumatic insemination. When people read that on the internet, it's a huge nightmare for them.
If, luckily, we don't have bedbugs in our beds, don't think that we can lounge about there in complete safety. Whatever we do, our beds are infested with undesirable guests which everyone has heard about but nobody has seen. Dermatophagoid pteronicinus mites, invisible to the naked eye, dine on our dead skin, our hair and our pubic hair. Their empty cells and tiny droppings cause many allergies.
It's estimated that mites are responsible for 45 to 50% of allergic illness, and the difference with other allergies is that mites are present all year long. All year we sleep with mites, but we're only exposed to pollen grains 2 or 2.5 months a year.
Dr. Alan Michiels practices in Belgium and visits patients suffering from allergies that are sometimes very serious.
In a mattress like yours, there could be up to 2 million mites. And they're inside the mattress, but also on the surface, in the dust. In a pillow, up to 10% is made up of dead mites. And that's right beside your nose, so you breathe it all night, and like that you become allergic to them.
When I have an attack, my eyes sting, and sometimes I have a runny nose.
Does it get blocked sometimes?
Yes, after I sneeze a bit.
And when will that happen? In the night, or rather in the morning?
In the morning when I wake up.
Ah, yes, on waking.
Who would have thought our beds were jungles crawling with life? These wild plants, seen through an electronic microscope, are fungi which do well in the humidity of our sweat.
Inside the mattress, there are a lot of fungi, as well as the dead skin which we lose. That, associated with sweat, which is heat and moisture, leads to a multiplication of dust mites in the mattress. Since the 1970s and the oil shocks, there has been an increase in mite allergies, very clearly linked to the fact that we are insulating our homes. There's double glazing, which is excellent for saving energy, but also for dust mites, helping them to multiply. People spend a lot less time outside and live indoors, in front of the TV, computers, and video games, which have become more important. So there's a lot more exposure to domestic mites.
In all innocence, more and more people are having dangerous relationships. Some patients are so badly affected that they have to be desensitized in a hospital environment.
There, I'll put this little device under your nose, then we'll start to provoke a reaction to domestic mites with extracts, which my colleague will get you to breathe in. Breathe in slowly, then exhale, breathe in, and exhale more strongly. Yes, again, again, and again. There is nothing which at the moment indicates that we've reached a plateau for illnesses linked to mite allergies, rhinitis, conjunctivitis, or eczema, so they're going to keep growing. In the future, thanks to progress in molecular biology, we'll be able to imagine tailored vaccines. We'll be able to identify what proteins in mite droppings the subject is allergic to and administer only that protein. That's a much more powerful vaccine than at present.
While waiting, the best means of fighting against mites is to air out rooms for at least half an hour every day, including in winter, as cold is the enemy of these invisible creatures. If dermatophagoid mites sleep in our beds without asking permission, some of their cousins do far worse. Demodex mites live upon us. They colonize the roots of our eyelids and the pores of our face.
We are born, we have no Demodex mites. However, at the age of puberty, the hormonal balance in the body begins to change. This changes the type of oil that's produced in the face, the type of sebum, and afterwards the Demodex mites can feed on this and begin to grow. So for maybe 12, 13 years we have no mites, but after that we begin to build them up.
Placing absorbent patches allows measuring how much sebum is on the face and counting blackheads. The numbers counted suggest that the skin, which is examined, offers Demodex an ideal environment.
On this nose patch, we can see the presence of many blackheads, which you can see here in this image. This indicates overproduction of oil and sebum in the face, contributing to the formation of blackheads.
Demodex mites live in colonies in the pores of oily skin, as we can see in these electronic microscope images, magnified many hundreds of times. A female lays more than 20 eggs in a pore of our skin or in a single hair follicle. The number of Demodex increases as we get older. At 20 years old, a quarter of us are colonized, but at 80 years old, everyone has some. Once again, it's the droppings of the Demodex which poison our lives. Demodex is the only animal not to have an anus. As a result, it's impossible for it to rid itself of excrement, which accumulates in its body and ends up by killing it. Many bacteria are found in its digestive system. When the Demodex dies, these bacteria attack the victim's skin. Dr. Kavanagh has shown that it's this which is responsible for the reddening of skin known as rosacea, a sickness which often develops into a blotch and which affects 5 to 20% of the world's population.
Men tend to have a slightly higher density of Demodex mites in their skin than women. And interestingly, men often show worse symptoms of rosacea.
For his studies, Dr. Kavanagh has evaluated the rates of Demodex in the population.
No. Have a seat.
Thank you.
No. So, this is a model of a Demodex mite, and they live inside the pilosebaceous unit. They normally sit this way with their tail end pointing out. They are normal inhabitants of the skin.
So how many would we have on the face?
Normally, we have 1 or 2 per square centimetres, but in cases of rosacea, the density of Demodex mites increases to 10 or 20 per square centimetre, and this causes inflammation and damage to the skin.
Oh my God.
Looking at my skin, we can see the presence of blood vessels, we can see blackheads, but we can also see the presence of pores. And if we apply it to your face, we can see the presence of pores where the Demodex live.
There you go.
Thank you. This is one of the pets we have extracted from your face.
From my face?
Exactly. And as you can see, it has a mouth region, it has 4 pairs of legs, and this region here is called the abdomen. In total, they measure about 0.3 of a millimetre in length. Today, people have more Demodex mites than maybe 100 years ago. There may be many reasons for this. We have a better diet, and this diet influences the sebum we produce in our face. And the sebum is one of the food sources that the Demodex eats. The other factor then is If people are exposed to the air in sports or in walking a lot, and there's damage to the skin from sunlight, this can also allow the Demodex to grow, because damage to the skin leads to the leakage of blood, small amounts of blood, which they can also feed on. We believe that pollution may play a role in increasing the symptoms of rosacea.
However, efficient antibiotics exist.
It has proven impossible to completely eradicate the Demodex mites from the face, because as soon as the population decreases, if we come into close contact, embracing somebody can allow the Demodex to move from one person to the other.
If a long, passionate kiss can favor the transmission of Demodex, intimacy can also benefit another of our parasites. The louse has a chance here to pass from the hair of one person to another's.
Until a few years ago, the most favorable age for lice was 7 years old, the age when a child becomes a bit more independent for washing. But nowadays, it's seen that adolescents and even adults catch lice much more easily. And selfies have a lot to do with this, because lice are excellent tightrope walkers and pass from one head to another.
Highly alarmed by the hordes of lice invading our hair, apparently the Russian Agency for Consumer Protection is thinking very seriously of demanding the banning of selfies. As elsewhere, in Russia, the lice attack.
Les poux attaquent et se multiplient.
Hurrah, j'ai trouvé l'arme absolue. Et les poux sont tués.
To say there is an ultimate weapon against lice is untrue. Among insecticides, the last one which was revolutionary was pyrethrum, coming from chrysanthemum flowers, and malathion, which have neurotoxic effects and which acted upon the nervous system of the louse. Sadly, for about 15 years, these molecules haven't worked anymore because lice have developed resistance, and it can't be used now because it doesn't kill either lice or their eggs.
Dis, monsieur, tu te grattes la tête. Tu réfléchis ou tu as des poux?
To test lice resistance, Catherine has organised over more than 30 years Olympic competitions where the competitors face each other in contests of speed and against obstacles.
In the 21 products which I've tested over the last few years, there are 2 nowadays which are still efficient, products which have a mechanical effect. They coat and act like a plaster around the louse and stop it from moving, breathing, and having its principal vital functions.
Simply put, it wraps the lice in a kind of glue, non-toxic for humans, and keeps them in place until they die. Like the bedbug, when it comes to sex, the louse is an animal.
A louse has an unrestrained sexuality, because if we think of them in human terms, a male by 30 years of age would have been copulating for one entire year, 24 hours a day, which explains why lice are so numerous and it's so hard to eradicate their descendants.
It's also a super male. On a human scale, an erect penis would be the size of an adult human thigh. It makes you shudder to imagine the sex life of Mr. and Mrs. Louse. In a schoolyard or in the family, lice pass from one head to another with worrying agility. The survival of the species is based on mobility.
Also, everyone has to be treated at once, and there needs to be a World Louse Day. This is hard to do, but in small groups, even a town, this can work reasonably well, and the rate of infestation can be reduced enormously. There are even places where there are no more lice at all.
Lice are exclusively our parasites. If, by mistake, they wander into the fur of a cat, of a dog, or onto a cow, they will die of hunger. What they need is human blood and nothing else. But often, parasites desperate for hemoglobin aren't fussy and will eat anywhere. For ticks and mosquitoes, any blood is good to drink, animal or human. This is extremely dangerous because it establishes links between animals and explains why sometimes we get sick like animals. During the last 150 years, the average temperature has increased by 1 degree Celsius in Europe. Climate epidemiologist Karine Chauvet-Monfray makes forecasts about the development of tick populations that are responsible for many illnesses. She sets up weather stations which are a little special.
This is a classic station with temperature and humidity measured above, but the special thing is here. It's a device to measure the ground temperature below ground cover. Below ground cover means below dead leaves, which is where ticks live, where they take shelter when it's too warm, too dry, or too cold. They don't live in trees, as people sometimes say. They live in the ground cover. And when they hunt, they go onto the leaves and the twigs to await the approach of a host.
When an animal or a human approaches, the tick detects them thanks to its CO2 receptors sited at the end of its claws, which serves it for a nose. With its sharp claws, it grips tightly to the victim. To evaluate the spread of ticks according to the temperature, Karine's teams scour the ground. The most efficient capture method is to spread sheets on the ground so the ticks stick to the material.
There we've got about 5, which is quite a good value for the season and the weather. But at other times in the year, they're up to 10 and even, I think, 30 at the height of the season when we're hunting over 10 meters with a sheet. The record here is around 100 ticks, but in a good site at the right time.
This time, it's mainly adults captured, but at other times, it's larvae, transparent and microscopic, recovered in the sheets. In one laying, 2,000 to 3,000 larvae hatch. They're even more hard to detect because at that stage of their development, they're almost invisible to our eyes. The number of ticks collected and the weather data taken at the time of collection are studied to construct mathematical models to predict the abundance of a parasite that public health authorities are taking more and more seriously.
We collect in less than a dozen or so sites, but in a regular monthly fashion. And we also have campaigns where we complete our observations with the army or in other countries, like Holland or Belgium. All this data allows us to better understand the biology and to be able to make forecasts so as to not just know where the ticks are, but when they're active. Here's an example of the type of application which allows us to estimate the risk of tick activity according to a color code. The darker it is, the more risk there is. And these maps are regularly updated according to weather data.
The application extends to other parasites which are doing well, fleas and mosquitoes. Ticks are inactive when the temperature falls under 7 degrees Celsius. But cold days are less and less frequent, and ticks are taking advantage of this.
We're starting to regularly have ticks in winter collections as well as on higher ground, seeing tick populations present where there weren't any beforehand. For example, in the Pyrenees, the Alps. And in the same way, an increase with more and more ticks in the northern latitudes of Sweden and Canada.
The spread of ticks and invasion of territory which previously had none can be explained by a profound change in our ecosystems. Urban growth has meant that woods and forests are now close to edges of many centres. And wild animals carrying ticks often venture into urban zones.
I'm installing a camera which can film at night using infrared the populations of wild animals which visit these places and can then be correlated with tick populations.
Small rodents are the main hosts of ticks, but many wild species carry them. Wild pigs, deer, bucks and does, more and more of them. And these animals are less and less afraid of man.
Nowadays, our towns are growing at the expense of natural zones. We're getting closer to the last sanctuaries of nature, where wild animals which have parasites and pathogens live. These wild animals come more and more frequently into town, so we've got a mixture which creates real opportunities for invasive species to spread. 50 years ago, there were a lot less ticks and mosquitoes in our towns.
In need of nature, suffocated by pollution, city dwellers all over the world want greener and greener towns. Plantations and stagnant water attract another problem: mosquitoes.
Towns are made for our comfort. We're going to have buildings covered with plants. People will grow flowers at home, will water those flowers. It's an inexhaustible source of water, with the possibility that mosquitoes develop in that water. The tiger mosquito, for example, is emblematic of this kind of mosquito behavior. It's a mosquito that at first was wild, developing in little pools of water, and which bit by bit adapted to urban conditions, made them its domain, and since then has spread from town to town. We'll have to learn how to protect ourselves, including in towns where we thought we were safe.
Originally from Asia, the tiger mosquito arrived in Italy in the 90s. Now it is to be found in all the large urban centres in the south of Europe and is moving north following road routes, carried by trucks and private cars returning from holiday. It has been seen beyond the Rhine. The variations in climate that are happening open up to tiger mosquitoes and ticks zones where they were not present. However, both species spread serious illnesses which alarm public authorities. The tiger mosquito carries dengue, chikungunya, and the recently appeared Zika virus. Ticks spread Lyme disease, until now quite rare in Europe, and so little known. Over the last few years, the number of new cases has exploded. The tiger mosquito is diurnal. Its attacks peak at dawn and dusk. The female, once made pregnant, stings to get blood. A healthy victim is contaminated because the mosquito has previously stung a victim with the illness. The virus infects the saliva injected by the mosquito to make the blood more fluid. With the tick, the process is similar. Ticks have an impressive arsenal of tools which let it anchor solidly onto its victim. After that, it injects a powerful anesthetic into the skin and pierces it with the victim knowing nothing about it. Once in place, the tick becomes a sucking pump. After around 8 days of suction, it takes on 100 times its weight in blood.
A lot more ticks are to be seen in the environment, and people frequently get bitten. There are a lot more cases of tick illnesses, especially Lyme disease.
It took 10 years in France for the tiger mosquito to colonize 20 territories, and in just 5 years, it has taken 10 more. This is clearly a biological invasion we're seeing.
How do we get rid of these parasites, even more dangerous because of their stealth? Vaccines against illnesses transmitted by ticks and mosquitoes are slow to be developed, and years go by before they arrive on the market.
Des claques sur vos cuisses. Des claques sur vos bras. Super Timor est là.
Super Timor est encore plus fort avec sa nouvelle formule.
Tête peut nourrir plus d'un pou.
Like the louse, the other bloodsuckers are becoming more and more resistant to the chemicals used to destroy them.
In a recent study, it was found that in some regions it took 500 times more insecticide to kill mosquitoes. By using insecticides massively and without control, the selection of resistance is favoured. Most mosquitoes will die, but some will resist and survive, and those will give birth to a following generation, which is a little more resistant to insecticides and so forth. We're creating generations of mosquitoes which are more and more resistant.
Invasion de moustiques! Envoyez l'aérosol! Ils reviendront toujours.
Scientists are now searching through the genes of our persecutors to discover the secrets of their worrying adaptive capacity. Researchers have recently discovered that the first dose of blood changes how certain insects' genes express in hematophage insects, otherwise known as bloodsuckers. This change leads to a considerable strengthening of the cuticle of the bedbug, the louse, the crab, and the tick. Once thickened, the cuticle becomes a kind of extremely resistant armor which protects the insects from aggression, physical as well as chemical. The resistance of bloodsuckers to insecticides rests in their genes that stimulate the detoxification system. This is very developed in insects because it's their principal defense against plants which try to kill them.
So as not to be eaten, plants developed a system which allowed them to produce toxins, and in response, plant-eating insects also developed proteins which are capable of biodegrading these toxins, and nowadays mosquitoes have inherited through evolution these proteins which they can also use to degrade insecticide molecules. It's very effective, and that has allowed some populations to resist very strong doses of insecticide.
The chemical products used to destroy hematophage are the equivalent of the poisons developed by plants to defend themselves, and which the insects learnt to neutralize.
Our genetic research has allowed us to better understand this detoxification that mosquitoes use to resist insecticide, and so how to counter this phenomenon. What's certain is it's impossible to eradicate mosquitoes, so we'll have to adapt our lifestyle.
Genetics can be used in another way. Researchers have found that male mosquitoes can be genetically modified so that their progeniture don't develop. When they are released in great numbers into the environment, it's seen that, statistically, wild females tend to couple with the laboratory males rather than wild males. This coupling being sterile, the spread of mosquitoes is slowed.
There are already transgenic mosquitoes in laboratories. There are already transgenic mosquitoes being used to fight with, for example in South America, in Brazil, or in Australia, where small-scale releases have been made.
This method is effective, but playing with genetic modification remains the prerogative of the English-speaking world.
In French-speaking environments, this isn't at the forefront because there's a certain resistance to using these ways of fighting.
Currently, the European Union forbids the use of transgenic mosquitoes based on the principle of precaution and action against genetic modification. The Research Institute for Development, the IRD, is piloting an alternative project which sterilizes male tiger mosquitoes by radiation. Millions of sterilized male tiger mosquitoes are awaiting the green light to go into action. Releases by drone are being trialed in South America. Each flight releases 50,000 treated male mosquitoes over a zone of around 20 hectares. Other alternatives rely upon the natural predators of these creatures. In North America, the return of bat colonies to urban zones is favoured. In one night, a single chiropteran can devour over 2,000 mosquitoes.
There are predators for bedbugs, which are centipedes that kill them. But releasing centipedes in a house isn't possible, so biological warfare against bedbugs is very complicated.
Once, the tick population was, amongst other things, regulated by many predators, amongst which were insect-eating mammals, some birds, lizards, toads, and amphibians. When game was more widely hunted, the deer population was a lot less, and there were a lot less ticks.
It's a problem that there are more than 300 animal species that can carry ticks, reptiles, hares, rodents, and birds, which spread ticks a lot. But the biggest part of the problem at the moment is the deer population. They offer a large blood mass for ticks, and they can't get rid of ticks by scratching at them.
Nathalie Boulanger and Jacques Abarer want to reintroduce indirect predators, which, by regulating the presence of game, would much reduce the spread of ticks.
Speaking as a forester for 30 or 40 years, there's really an infestation of game, and it doesn't surprise me at all that there's an infestation of ticks coming from that. The predators absolutely have to return. We once had the lynx, which was a great predator, but which is disappearing because we've made it disappear, and the wolf, which is returning, and it's very important to let the wolves return because they're great predators, and that's the only way to limit the game and fauna to a normal level. Here's a game trail, more like a game highway. You can see an old deer spoor there.
Well, you see, to collect ticks, I tend to use these trails as well. And like that, I can collect a fair amount of ticks. Here, you see, I have a tube with around 150 that I collected in about an hour.
Well, well.
And all these ticks have fallen from the deer and other animals which are nearby.
The number of hunters continues to fall, and natural predators have been more or less eradicated. Large game will therefore continue to spread ticks. Researchers have not given up looking for biological ways of fighting and have turned to solutions which were proven in the past. For centuries, the inhabitants of the Balkans have covered the ground around their beds with bean leaves to defend themselves against all sorts of attackers. Snails, slugs, and plant-eating insects. Bean leaves are covered with trichomes. These are microscopic sharp hairs upon which the insects impale themselves and die. Researchers are trying to develop a synthetic surface which has the same characteristics as this spiky plant trap.
You can also use diatomaceous earth. Silica, it's a crystal mineral. It's sharp and will cause microhemorrhages in bedbugs. It kills them, not immediately. It's not instantaneous, but in 4 to 5 days they'll die. The problem is, it's silica, and you mustn't breathe it in.
Confronted with the recent wave of bedbugs, putting furniture and contaminated objects in a hot chamber has been very effective, and this is being developed.
So, we find chairs and we find mattresses, and all that represents about 15 days of treatment for bedbugs. And in peak period, we can get 5 to 6 times that quantity.
The procedure is relatively recent, and research is continuing to know more exactly the temperatures at which steaming is the most effective for each category of parasite.
With chemical products, it takes a month of treatment, and there's also a problem of toxicity for people. Chemical products are put in a house with children playing on the floors, and all those problems we're trying to fix now more and more by a mechanical attack, especially using heat and cold. In a morning and at most a day, the problem is solved.
Jean-Michel puts test bedbugs and a temperature gauge in the furniture which goes into the chamber.
Our research shows that it takes a temperature of at least 48 degrees to exterminate bedbugs. In our research, we're trying to be as economical as possible, which means using cold or heat, but at the right levels. In winter, we can cool things down, which allows us to save energy because in winter the things are already cold and it's quicker to get to negative temperatures. Thanks to this mobile heat chamber, we can go directly to the base of the apartments to treat with heat or cold social environments, hotels, everything which has bedbugs for sure, but also fleas, mites, and any insect which can infest an apartment or a building. It's really a treatment of the future. It's very fast and it's almost organic.
The CO2 of our breathing is a signal which attracts many bloodsuckers, but it's not the only one. Mosquitoes and bedbugs are very sensitive to the odorous molecules of our body. The idea of using this attraction as a biological trap isn't new. In the 1970s, the odor of armpits was synthesized and a substrate made to bait mosquitoes. In the 90s, entomology professor Willem Takken from the Research Center of the University of Wageningen in Holland became very interested in using the smell of feet with the same objective.
Right now, we're testing new types of trap, which associate a temperature of 37 degrees, human odor and CO2. For the CO2, we insert a pellet in the trap, and for the odor, this product which smells really, really bad. Here I'm testing it on bedbugs. But the same stimuli attract other bloodsuckers, like mosquitoes, for example. Here we can see clearly that it's more efficient with 3 stimuli than 1. Here the temperature. But despite the efficiency of this type of trap, we can't eradicate bedbugs in a house or an apartment. It's an interesting approach because it reproduces a decoy, a human guinea pig.
In Germany, American Larry Hansen relies on the smell of bedbugs to track them. He has created a dog unit which inspects planes to detect bedbugs which have embarked unseen in suitcases.
Using a dog to find bedbugs is one of the best ways to find them. The dog has an success rate of 95%.
Frankfurt Airport, since 2018, is the only one to have this type of service.
But the problem is getting bigger, so I really think that every airport should offer it to their customers.
Direkt ran? Direkt? Komm ran.
We have a lot of people who use our service. We have airlines that use us to search the airplanes, and we also have customers that come with their luggage and ask us to search their luggage with our dogs. It's exploded. It's gone way up.
Hi. Hi. How are you?
Very well.
Hi.
Nice to meet
We
you.
just need to go around the corner here, and then we can search the bag. Okay, we can do it right here, sir, if it's all right with you.
Check. Gesetzt. So he smells something, sir. Eine Bettwanze, die riecht sehr schwach, nur nach Pheromonen.
Bedbug pheromones have little smell, but the dog can identify the smell of pheromones anyway and looks for that odor of a live bedbug in the baggage.
Und das abzusuchen nach den Pheromonen einer lebenden Bettwanze.
And when it finds a bedbug, it lies down.
Larry Hansen doesn't look after the decontamination. He tells the passenger that the baggage is infested and it's up to them to get it treated.
The problem with the bed bugs is increasing because you can travel throughout Europe with the train and with an airplane very cheap now. So Europe has become a small town, and that's why the problem's becoming bigger.
Climate warming will continue, and the old can of insecticide of grandmother, as toxic for us as it is for insects, has to be definitively forgotten. The numerous studies which have been made, especially in the domain of genetics, should lead to effective solutions in terms of prevention and fighting. But when? While waiting, we're going to have to learn to live with these squatters that we don't know much about.
We can't dream about eradicating them from the surface of the Earth. That's a fantasy which is completely anthropocentric. We'll have to live together to control the risk and act to manage it rather than try and fight it.
Whatever the problems and the perils that living together brings for us, don't panic. It's not the end of the world. While Lyme disease is much talked about in the media, specialists are keeping their cool.
More and more people are bitten by ticks, but amongst the ticks present in the environment, only 10 to 20% are infected. And amongst the people who are bitten, only 2 to 4% will develop Lyme disease. You have to see things relatively and not go crazy after a tick bite.
As for bedbugs, the situation is under control and being closely watched.
In the world, every day, millions of people are bitten by bedbugs without any consequences. In the laboratory, they can transmit viruses or bacteria, so we have to remain very vigilant.
Scratching our skin and swearing at the creatures that persecute us is written into the destiny of the human race. Our ancestors scratched more than we do nowadays, and our descendants will scratch as well.